Brookhaven, a picturesque town steeped in history, seemed to have stopped in time, preserving the essence of days gone by. Its cobblestone streets, lined with old and well-kept houses, held secrets of generations past. On one such afternoon, as the sun bade farewell with golden and orange hues, a gentle breeze made the leaves of the ancient trees dance, setting the stage for an encounter that would undoubtedly change destinies. That day, the weekly fair in the town center was in full swing. Colorful stalls lined the square, offering everything from fresh fruits and vegetables to homemade treats and handicrafts reminiscent of simpler, more welcoming times. The murmur of conversations, the clinking of coins, and the laughter of the townspeople formed a daily symphony that warmed the hearts of all who passed by. Among the fair's visitors, the Carter family stood out. Sophie Carter, a little girl of only 6 years, ran with the typical liveliness of childhood, her wavy brown hair bouncing with each step. Dressed in a delicate floral dress in shades of pink and lilac, she radiated innocence and curiosity. Her big eyes, seeming to reflect the purity of her heart, sparkled as she absorbed every detail of that enchanting world. By her side, her mother, Margaret Carter, walked with firm and careful steps. With her dark brown hair pulled back into a practical bun and an expression that blended serenity with alertness, Margaret exuded the confidence of someone well acquainted with life's ups and downs. Dressed in an earthy-toned blouse paired with a classically cut skirt, she embodied the balance between tradition and modernity, always ready to support her daughter in every new discovery. As the family lost themselves among the colors and sounds of the fair, something unusual caught Sophie's attention. Near one of the side entrances, leaning against a weathered wooden post, lay a large dog. His ashen coat, with visibly dirty patches, contrasted with the vibrant surroundings. His eyes, deep and melancholy, seemed to carry a burden of pain and untold stories, as if each sign narrated a memory of abandonment and loneliness. Sophie stopped abruptly. Her steps, once hurried and carefree, turned into slow, cautious movements. The little girl's heart began to beat faster as she met that sad gaze. Without fully understanding the nuances of suffering, but feeling a strong empathy, she slowly approached, as if every step might, in some way, ease the pain of that being. "Mom, look, that dog looks so sad," Sophie murmured in a soft, compassionate voice. Margaret, who had been following her daughter's steps, stopped and looked in the indicated direction. Her eyes met Sophie's, and in that childlike sparkle she recognized the same unease she once felt when confronted with abandonment. In a tender yet realistic tone, she replied, "My dear, unfortunately many stray dogs live like this. He might even have had an owner, but sometimes people forget about those who need care the most." However, Sophie's pure decision was already made. With a mixture of courage and gentleness, she knelt a few paces away from the dog and extended her hand in a friendly gesture. Her eyes, full of innocence, locked onto the animals, and at that moment, time seemed to slow down, allowing an invisible bond to form between them. The dog, who until then had been resting with the resigned air typical of the Forsaken, raised his eyes for a brief moment. His ears perked up timidly at the sound of that sweet voice, and for a few moments, his gaze revealed a spark of hope, as if he recognized in her the possibility of a new beginning. The moving scene caught the attention of a man passing by one of the stalls. Dressed in an apron stained with flour and bearing a face marked by the hardships of life, he observed the scene with disdain. "That one," the man said in a rough, uninterested voice. "He's good for nothing. He's been left here for days. He must have been abandoned by someone who didn't care. He's nothing but trouble." The man's dismissive words wounded Sophie's already sensitive heart. With a voice choked by emotion, she asked, "But does he have a name? Please, I want to know if he has a name." The man merely shrugged, indicating that, to him, the dog's story was nothing more than a problem to be discarded. Noticing the intensity of her feelings, Margaret cautiously intervened. "Sophie, dear, we can't take him home right now. He might be sick or even aggressive. We don't know anything about him. But Sophie's determination and the purity of her feelings outweighed any fear. With eyes shining with conviction, she insisted, "At least I can give him some food. He deserves to be loved." Moved by her insistence, Margaret relented. She went over to a nearby stall and, after speaking with the vendor, bought a piece of roasted chicken. Sophie's heart raced as she returned to the dog, holding the food in both hands as if it carried the hope of changing the fate of that abandoned soul. Approaching carefully, Sophie extended her hand and, in a gesture full of tenderness, offered the piece of chicken. The dog, initially hesitant, slowly came closer. His eyes, which until then seemed to have lost all the spark of life, began to brighten with a faint glow. Slowly, he took the food, almost as if afraid that that moment of affection might be fleeting. While the dog ate, Sophie smiled. Her smile, sincere and radiant, was like a ray of sunshine breaking through the gloom of a rainy day. To her, that simple gesture carried the promise that even the most wounded hearts could, with patience and love, find healing. Day after day, little Sophie made a point of returning to the fair. Always with a smile on her face and a bit of food in her hands, she would sit next to the dog, now christened Max, to tell stories and offer affection. Each encounter, however small, reinforced the bond between them. Gradually, Max began to show signs of trust. A less wary look, a gentle wag of his tail, and even the relaxation of the tense muscles that had once defined him. Margaret watched, with a mix of worry and hope, the unfolding of this story. She knew that Max's road to recovery would be long and filled with challenges. But in her daughter's determination, she saw the seed of true transformation. For Margaret, Sophie's gesture was not merely an act of kindness, but an example that compassion and innocence can indeed change the course of lives marked by abandonment. As dusk deepened, the fair began to empty. The last rays of the sun danced over the now vacant stalls while the night breeze carried a sense of renewal. The town, quiet and full of secrets, seemed to bless that most unlikely encounter. For Sophie, every minute spent beside Max was a lesson that even amidst the shadows of the past, the light of love could illuminate new paths. On the drive back home, the atmosphere in the car was filled with anticipation and the promise of a new start. Margaret drove carefully while Sophie, gazing out the window, recalled every detail of that extraordinary day. The city lights passed by softly, and in her heart the little girl was already weaving dreams of a future where Max would have a safe, loving home. When they arrived home, the family settled into a cozy environment with soft lighting that contrasted with the chaos of the outside world. Margaret lovingly prepared a special little spot for Max, a space with a plush blanket and a small bowl of fresh water. Meanwhile, Sophie stayed close to her new friend, silently promising that she would never leave him alone again. Max, still cautious and bearing the marks of his past in every scar, observed everything with a mixture of wariness and a budding hope. When night finally fell and the family retired to rest, Sophie remained by Max's side. Seated on the living room rug, she began to tell quiet stories, tales of fairy tales, brave heroes, enchanted castles, and happy endings that promised even the most wounded hearts could find peace. Although Max did not understand every word, he absorbed the sweet sound of the little girl's voice. Every caress, every murmured word, helped soften the marks of time, creating a silent yet powerful bond between them. Margaret, watching from a distance, discreetly wiped away tears. She knew that Max's journey toward healing would be long, but at that moment, witnessing Sophie's compassion and determination, she felt a renewed faith that even in the toughest circumstances, love could transform lives. The distant sounds of the slumbering town blended with the whispers of the night as each of them prepared for the challenges the new day would bring. In the quiet of the early morning, as the stars timidly peeked through the sky, Brookhaven seemed to whisper ancient secrets of redemption and hope. The silent streets held the echo of that encounter, and the wind, which once brought the chill of abandonment, now seemed to carry the warmth of a better future. Max, lying in his carefully prepared little spot, rested with an expression that mixed exhaustion with a faint spark of hope, a sign that despite his traumas, he was beginning to believe in the possibility of a new beginning. At dawn, the first rays of sun streamed through the Carter home's windows, ushering in an air of renewal. Sophie woke up convinced that the new day would bring opportunities to further strengthen the bond with her four-legged friend. Margaret, as she prepared breakfast with care, observed the small gestures that revealed Max's quiet progress. Every glance, every trembling movement, was a victory against the ghosts of a painful past. That morning, with the gentle glow of the sun illuminating their faces and filling the home with welcoming light, it seemed that transformation was already underway. Brookhaven, with its calm streets filled with stories, witnessed the beginning of a journey where a little girl's courage and an abandoned dog's resilience united to create a story of overcoming adversity and love. And so, on that memorable evening at the fair during the drive home, and within the warmth of a lovingly prepared home, the new life of Max and Sophie began to take shape. Fate, whimsical and generous, had brought these two beings together so that abandonment and pain would transform into hope and new beginnings. With each passing day, the small bond of trust grew stronger, paving the way for a future where love and compassion were the greatest forces. After that unforgettable day at the fair, life at the Carters began to change in ways no one could have predicted. The return home, always full of promises of comfort, now carried a new meaning. Max, the rescued dog, had found a home that, despite the shadows of his past, promised a new beginning filled with love and care. Upon arriving at their modest residence, the family prepared to welcome the new member with the delicacy that only those who understand the value of compassion can have. Margaret, with her attentive gaze and gentle hands, had set aside a special corner for Max, a cozy space in the corner of the living room where a plush blanket rested on an old armchair, accompanied by a small bowl of fresh water. The walls, decorated with old photographs and cherished mementos, formed the perfect backdrop for the start of a new story of redemption. That first night, the atmosphere in the house was one of quiet anticipation. Sophie, who from the very first encounter had shown unconditional love for her new friend, stayed close to Max dressed in her delicate floral dress. The little girl settled near the dog, while Max, still cautious, showed signs of his past traumas. His eyes, though timidly sparkling with a hint of hope, still reflected the pain of abandonment. During the night, the first signs of Max's emotional scars began to surface. When he tried to lie down, the dog hesitated, as if every movement evoked memories of suffering. Margaret approached him carefully, whispering comforting words and promising that in this home he would be safe. Meanwhile, Sophie gently stroked Max and murmured promises that nothing would ever hurt him again, trying with her touch and voice to ease the lingering remnants of a painful past. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight brought with them a sense of renewal, though it quickly became clear that Max's arrival was not a fairy tale. At breakfast, as Margaret lovingly prepared the meal, Max timidly approached his water bowl, his eyes still full of mistrust. Observing every gesture of the dog, Sophie felt her heart fill with compassion, aware that her new friend would need time to learn to trust. The days passed in a simple routine, full of small internal battles. Max began to explore the house with the caution of someone who had learned to expect the worst. One morning, as the soft light of the sun filled the rooms, the dog stopped in front of an old wardrobe, shrinking back and trembling. Margaret, passing by in the corridor, noticed his reaction and gently approached to ask if everything was all right. But Max remained distant, his eyes fixed on something invisible that only he could see. In that moment, Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine, aware that there was a past within him that he refused to forget. Over the weeks, small breakthroughs began to emerge. One autumn afternoon, with golden light filtering through the trees, Sophie and Max shared a moment of pure harmony. While the girl drew on the living room floor, the dog, lying next to the blanket that had now become his, let out a sigh of relief, as if, in that brief moment, the shadows of the past dissipated, giving way to a feeling of safety and belonging. Yet, not everything was calm. On one particularly hectic morning, the peaceful routine of the family was disrupted by an episode that revealed the extent of Max's traumas. Richard, while doing some minor maintenance in the backyard, passed close to the dog. A broom left askew suddenly provoked an intense reaction. The very moment Max caught sight of it, his body tensed and a muffled cry escaped his throat. Alarmed, Sophie ran to comfort him, grabbing Richard's arm and exclaiming that he was terribly frightened. Richard, with a calm voice, approached to try to soothe the animal, but the sight of the broom had reawakened a painful memory, and Max retreated to a corner of the room. Margaret, witnessing the scene, softly remarked that certain sounds and objects might bring back memories of what he had suffered. With determination and tenderness, Sophie embraced Max, murmuring that he would never be alone as long as she was near. Those simple, affectionate words seemed to penetrate the dog's soul, and gradually he began to realize that this home was truly a safe haven. In order to aid Max's emotional recovery, the family put small strategies into practice. Margaret researched and spoke with veterinarians and specialists to find methods that could soothe his traumas. She discovered that patience and the repetition of loving gestures were essential to rebuilding lost trust. On rainy days and quiet nights, the family gathered for sessions of affection. Sophie told stories while stroking Max, and Richard, with his steady voice, assured him that this home was a place of protection. After a light rain that seemed to wash away the dust of the past, Margaret decided to create a peace corner in the house. With great care, she arranged a space with a soft bed, a few simple toys, and, most importantly, the constant presence of Sophie. This special environment symbolized renewal and the hope that Max's painful past could gradually be replaced by moments of tenderness and security. Despite their efforts, not everything was easily mended. At times, familiar sounds, the creak of a door or the groan of an old floor, triggered unexpected reactions in Max. A distant look, muscles tensing in defense. Such episodes were reminders that the pain of the past did not vanish immediately. Margaret and Richard adjusted their attitudes, always ready to offer comfort and to reaffirm that this home was his safe harbor. On one rainy afternoon, with an atmosphere heavy with melancholy, Richard spoke with Sophie about the challenges they were facing. Seated in the living room with a cup of tea warming their hands, he explained that some wounds take time to heal. With teary eyes, the little girl nodded, understanding that the journey would be long, but confident that every act of love would help Max overcome his fears. In that moment, the distant look in the dog's eyes seemed to capture the sincerity of the words, and for a brief instant, a glimmer of recognition shone in his gaze. Daily life became a delicate balance between moments of overcoming and occasional relapses. On one particularly busy day, after an insensitive comment from a neighbor about Max's past, the dog reacted dramatically. He hid under the table, visibly trembling. Sophie ran to get him, while Margaret enveloped him in a protective embrace, whispering that here, he was safe. From that episode on, the family established carefully planned routines so that Max could acclimate to the everyday stimuli, short walks around the neighborhood, playful moments in the backyard, and above all, the constant reaffirmation that this home was his sanctuary. Time, patient as an artisan, slowly sculpted Max's transformation. Amid days full of challenges and nights of uncertainty, the dog began to show that the bond he had formed with Sophie and the Carters was, indeed, healing his wounds. During a quiet walk in a nearby park, as the sun set and painted the sky in warm hues, Max walked beside Sophie with a posture that blended caution with timid confidence. Every step was a victory against the echoes of his past, and the glances exchanged between the girl and the dog said more than words ever could. Even though progress was visible, the marks of the past remained. On some nights, the darkness and silence amplified Max's fear, leaving him restless as if he were on alert for imminent danger. In those hours, the tales of heroes and happy endings told by Sophie created an almost magical refuge, transporting the dog to a world where fear was replaced by safety and affection. Always attentive, Margaret began to record each small breakthrough in a diary kept with care. Every moment when Max approached without hesitation, every gaze that grew less lost, and every touch that seemed to dissolve a bit of his suffering was noted with the hope that, with patience and love, even the deepest wounds could find healing. As the routine solidified, the Carters' home transformed into a true sanctuary of hope. Max's presence, though laden with sad memories, came to symbolize the victory of love over abandonment. Every loving gesture, every word of comfort, and every small advancement was celebrated as a precious triumph, demonstrating that, gradually, the shadows of the past yielded to a new light. The peace that was slowly settling in the Carters' home was suddenly interrupted one summer afternoon. In the backyard, where Max had begun to show signs of trust, an unexpected disturbance altered the calm atmosphere. Suddenly, a loud noise invaded the area. Fireworks, set off improperly, shattered the silence with intense explosions. Each blast seemed to transport Max back to the dark days of abandonment and mistreatment. The moment the first booms echoed, Max leaped to his feet. His muscles, previously relaxed under the gentle warmth of the sun, tensed violently, and his usually serene eyes filled with panic. That sound, familiar to anyone who has lived through deep traumas, awakened in him memories of anguish and vulnerability. The dog began moving erratically, seeking a refuge to escape the invisible threat of the fireworks. Sophie, who had been playing in the backyard moments before, heard the explosions and, with a mix of surprise and concern, ran to Max's side. With the purity and determination only a child can possess, she approached the dog, calling out in a trembling yet firm voice, "Max, stay here. I'm here with you." As the fireworks continued, Sophie's face showed her effort to overcome the spreading fear. She knelt beside the dog, extending her arms in a gesture of affection and protection. Margaret and Richard, who soon noticed the commotion, paused their activities and hurried into the backyard. Upon seeing the scene, both of them felt their hearts tighten at Max's vulnerability, yet they also swelled with pride at their daughter's courage in taking on the role of protector. The night breeze, which had once brought a touch of renewal, now felt laden with tension. Each explosion seemed to stretch time into long, agonizing seconds, and Max's eyes, which normally held a spark of hope, filled with despair. Still, the comforting embrace of Sophie and Margaret's soft words, murmuring, "You're safe, Max, we're here with you," helped to ease the panic, even if only for brief moments. Despite the fear, the dog's instinctive reaction showed that although his traumas were far from healed, there was an opening for recovery. Slowly, as the fireworks subsided and the voices around him worked to calm the situation, the environment began to regain its balance. Yet that episode would leave a deep mark, reviving shadows that Max would have to struggle to overcome in the days to come. A few days after the chaos caused by the fireworks, the Carter family decided it was time to resume their routine and seek a bit of normalcy. On a sunny morning, with the weather mild and promising, Margaret, Richard, and Sophie prepared to take Max for a walk in the town park. The place, known for its wide green spaces and well-maintained trails, had always been a refuge of peace for the family. As they strolled among the trees under a clear sky, Max walked beside Sophie with a look that mixed caution with timid trust. The dog, who had already shown progress in his recovery, appeared to enjoy the contact with nature. Every step taken in that park was a small victory, a reaffirmation that, despite a painful past, there was room for joy. However, the serenity of the walk was interrupted when, in a more secluded area of the park, an unexpected figure appeared. A man with a rough and unkempt appearance, wearing worn-out clothes and bearing a cold stare, slowly approached. His steps were measured, and his very presence seemed to carry the hardness of a troubled past. Upon spotting Max, the man stopped and fixed his gaze on the dog with a mixture of disdain and bitterness. Sophie, always sensitive and with a keen protective instinct, felt a shiver run down her spine. Without hesitating, she tightened Max's leash and positioned herself beside him, as if trying to form a protective shield. Richard and Margaret, closely watching the scene, also moved forward, alert to the possibility of a confrontation. The park, which moments before exuded peace, now seemed engulfed in an almost palpable tension. The man's hard, unfeeling look evoked in Max the resurfacing traumas, memories that the dog had long tried to forget, but that now surged back forcefully with his every step. The tension in the park escalated as the man, with a sarcastic smile, approached Sophie and Max. In a harsh voice, he spat words that deeply hurt not only the dog but also the little girl's heart. "So, this is where you hide, you weak dog. You still belong to me." Those contemptuous words sent shockwaves through the atmosphere. Max, who until then had been trying to maintain a cautious posture, reacted instinctively. For a moment, the dog seemed to hesitate, but Sophie's protective look only grew firmer. With teary eyes and a resolute voice, the girl stepped between the man and her four-legged friend. "Max isn't weak. He's brave and deserves to be happy. He's part of our family now, and you won't take that away from us." Sophie's courageous tone, remarkable for her tender age, echoed in the silence that fell around them. Richard, advancing with steady steps, intervened and positioned himself by his daughter's side. With the authority of a protective father, he declared, "This dog is ours. Here he is safe. If you intend to hurt or threaten him in any way, step away immediately." The man, taken aback by the unity and firmness displayed by the Carters, hesitated for a moment. His eyes, once so sure and disdainful, now reflected a mixture of anger and disbelief at Sophie's courage and Richard's intervention. The atmosphere in the park vibrated with the intensity of the confrontation, a battle where the past sought to impose itself, but the present, marked by familial love and protection, demonstrated its strength. After several long seconds, unable to withstand the family's determination, the man slowly backed away. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the trees, leaving behind an air of relief and victory. Max's gaze, though still marked by his traumas, seemed to acknowledge that at that very moment, he was no longer alone. Sophie, hugging Max tightly, whispered soothing words. "I will always take care of you, Max. Together, we will face all the fear." Margaret and Richard, their faces etched with emotion, joined the embrace, reaffirming that the true power lay in unity and shared love. Back in the comfort of the Carters' home, the episode in the park left its marks, but it also strengthened the bond between them. That night, gathered in the softly lit living room, the family sat together reflecting on the events of the day. Richard, speaking in a calm voice, began, "Today we faced not only Max's fear, but also the ghosts of a past that insists on returning. Yet, see how you all came together and showed that love can overcome any obstacle." Margaret, with tears held back in her eyes, added, "Every challenge we face together is an opportunity to heal our wounds. Max has already shown that even when traumas resurface, he can find strength in our protection and in the love we share." Sophie, whose courage lit up the room, held Max's paw tenderly and said, "I promise I will never leave you alone, Max. Every day will be a new chance for us to be happy together." That night was marked by a profound silence filled with understanding, where every family member recognized that the journey to overcome the past would be long, but that unity and empathy were the greatest tools for healing. Max, lying in his carefully prepared little corner, seemed to rest with a faint smile in his eyes, as if, timidly, he was beginning to believe that true love could erase the scars of pain. In the days that followed, the Carters adjusted their routines to reinforce Max's sense of security. Short, peaceful walks around the neighborhood, sessions of gentle affection, and special attention to the dog's reactions became part of their daily life. Every small progress was celebrated as a triumph, and moments of relapse were met with patience and understanding. The incident in the park, though painful, served to reinforce the message that confronting the ghosts of the past is essential to moving forward. Sophie's determination and the unwavering protection of Richard and Margaret turned that day of tension into a milestone in Max's journey of overcoming. The family learned that even when fear seemed to resurrect old wounds, mutual support and true love have the power to transform pain into strength. As the moon shone outside and the stars bore witness to the comforting silence of the home, the Carters felt that every challenge made them stronger. Max, who had come such a long way since that first meeting at the fair, now walked with an air of resilience and hope. His eyes, once marred by terror, began to reflect the light of a future where the past no longer dictated the rules. That night, as the family bid farewell to the day, they felt that the union that sustained them was the true essence of healing. Every hug, every whispered word, and every gesture of tenderness were like bricks in the construction of a new path, one where love had the power to transform scars into badges of honor. The rising sun tinged Brookhaven's streets with gold, heralding a new day full of possibilities. In the Carter household, the atmosphere radiated renewed energy and hope. After so many struggles and triumphs, the family had transformed their home into a refuge where fear gave way to affection, and Max, the dog once marked by a dark past, now stood as a symbol of courage. His journey of healing, carved with patience and love, inspired not only the Carters but also the entire community. On that special day, the residents of Brookhaven gathered to celebrate a long-awaited event at the Central Park, an Agility and Obedience Festival. Organized with care by neighbors and animal enthusiasts, the event was an opportunity to show that with dedication, even the most vulnerable beings can achieve great things. And Max, with his serene look and newfound determination, was to be the star of the day. Sophie, who was already straddling the line between childlike innocence and surprising maturity, prepared for the big moment. Dressed in her delicate floral dress, which had witnessed countless reunions and victories, she carefully adjusted the colorful bandana adorning Max's neck. This simple accessory symbolized, for everyone, the love and transformation the dog had experienced, now representing the overcoming of past fears and traumas. As Sophie fine-tuned the details, Richard and Margaret watched with pride and relief. Every accomplishment of Max was also a victory for them, who had devoted time, love, and patience to transform a painful past into a future full of possibilities. Gradually, the park square filled with colors, smiles, and animated voices, a true celebration of life and resilience. With the start of the event, the festival course revealed itself to be filled with challenges. Tunnels, ramps, jumps, and slaloms arranged to test the agility and harmony between the competitors and their animals. When the judge announced the participants, the crowd erupted in warm applause. Sophie, her face illuminated by a serene confidence, held Max's leash tightly. The dog, whose evolution was evident in every step, now exhibited a determined gaze, as if every obstacle overcome affirmed that his past would no longer define him. At the judge's signal, Max dashed through the obstacles with surprising agility. Every jump, every curve was executed in perfect harmony with Sophie, who seemed to share with the dog one mind and one heart. Their synchrony was so natural that, for a few moments, time appeared to suspend, and the audience was carried away by the emotion of the moment. Every obstacle surmounted symbolized not only the skill he had acquired, but also the overcoming of traumas that once seemed insurmountable. At the end of the trial, the crowd cheered and applause echoed throughout the park. Amid the public's euphoria, Sophie knelt beside Max and, in a spontaneous and deeply emotional gesture, hugged him tenderly. Richard and Margaret joined the familial embrace, forming a circle that radiated protection, love, and unity. There, under the soft glow of the evening, the bond between the girl, the dog, and the entire family appeared unbreakable, a living testament that affection can change any destiny. Not all chapters of this journey of overcoming were behind them. Amid the celebration, a familiar figure appeared from afar, watching the scene with a cold, unfeeling gaze. It was Max's former owner, the rough, negligent man who had once contributed to the dog's suffering. Leaning against a tree, he observed, with a mixture of resentment and disbelief, the victory that Max's new life represented. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Max, who in other times would have reacted instinctively at the slightest hint of his past, stood firm by Sophie's side. His gaze, once marked by pain, now radiated a quiet determination, a refusal to allow old wounds to reopen. Max's courage, bolstered by his family's unconditional love, seemed to declare that the past no longer held power over him. Unable to break through that protective bond, the man slowly averted his eyes and, without another word, disappeared among the trees. His presence, though brief, served as a reminder that true transformation does not require erasing every scar, but the ability to transcend suffering with love and resilience. This episode further reinforced the Carters' unity, as they proved unshakable in the face of any challenge that the past might try to impose. After the competition ended, the Carters were ovate by the entire community. Max's story had spread throughout Brookhaven, and many saw in that dog not only an example of overcoming, but also a symbol of hope for abandoned animals and for anyone carrying scars in their heart. Local media soon took an interest in the case, turning the journey of the Carters and Max into an inspiration for adoption campaigns and support programs for animals in vulnerable situations. In the following days, the Carters' home became a point of reference for those who believed in the transformative power of affection. Neighbors and friends came to see the miracle of Max, to listen, moved, to the story told by Sophie, and to witness how a simple gesture of compassion could change the fate of such a unique being. Margaret, with her wisdom and serenity, participated in these conversations, emphasizing the importance of looking at all living beings, human or animal, with empathy. Richard, for his part, began discussions with city officials to implement measures for the welfare of abandoned animals. Max's example not only inspired Brookhaven's residents, but also caught the attention of authorities, who started investing in protection programs and educational campaigns about the importance of adoption and responsible care. Sophie, who had always been Max's little guardian, now assumed a new role. In local schools, the little girl was invited to share her story, encouraging both children and adults to cultivate empathy and to fight against indifference. Her words, simple and sincere, touched deeply everyone who heard them, demonstrating that even the smallest act of kindness can be the starting point for great transformations. Max, who once symbolized abandonment, now walked with ease and confidence, as if he had finally found his place in the world. His eyes, once darkened by pain, shone with the brilliance of a new dawn. Every step he took alongside Sophie was a reaffirmation that life, when nurtured with love, can blossom even in the most unexpected places. The dog began to participate in small events and visit shelters, serving as an example and inspiration for other animals seeking a second chance. On one particularly sunny day, as the park filled with laughter and cheerful conversation, a symbolic ceremony was organized to honor Max and the Carter family. In front of an emotional audience, community representatives presented Richard and Margaret with a commemorative plaque that read, "To those who teach that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that the legacy of courage transcends the past and illuminates the path to a better future." The ceremony was a milestone. Tears mixed with smiles among the attendees, bearing witness to the transformation that Max and Sophie's journey had brought, not only to their lives but also to those around them. The former owner, now nothing more than a bitter memory, was overshadowed by the brilliance of the new story unfolding in that home. As the community dispersed that evening, the Carters felt in every hug and glance that overcoming is a continuous process. The story of Max and all those who believed in the power of love did not end there. Instead, it opened the door to new stories, encounters, and a legacy of compassion that would extend beyond Brookhaven. As night fell and the sun dipped below the horizon, tinting the sky with warm shades of orange and red, Max and Sophie remained side by side, gazing at the distance. In that moment of silence, the world seemed to conspire for a bright future, a future where every heartbeat would tell a new story of rebirth. With bonds strengthened by time and unconditional love, The Carters closed the final chapter of a journey filled with challenges and triumphs. The legacy of a courageous heart was not merely the story of a dog who overcame his past, but a living proof that when there is room for love, even the deepest scars can transform into medals of honor. Every day that passed, Brookhaven grew more aware of the importance of caring for those who share our existence. And for many, the image of Max, with his serene gaze and resolute posture, remained an everlasting reminder that everyone deserves a chance to start over. As that cycle came to a close, when the city lights turned on and the stars began to shine, the Carters ended the day with the feeling of a mission accomplished. Through their dedication, they had not only rescued an abandoned animal, but also ignited a spark of hope that would spread throughout the community. And so, the story of Max and Sophie became eternal, engraved in the hearts of all who believe that transformation is possible. A legacy that teaches that, even after the fiercest storms, the sun always returns to light new paths, paths of love, overcoming, and above all, courage. Did you enjoy this moving story? Then, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Your support is very important to us, so we can keep bringing narratives full of emotion and lessons. Turn on notifications so you won't miss the next stories. And now we want to know, have you ever had a pet that changed your life? Tell your story in the comments.